What's up, all you lane changers? This is Kale Streeter. I'm riding solo here in the great state of Nebraska on a Tuesday. We are doing a special edition of Fast Lane Fix, just because we are doing video today. And the only reason for that is the fact that we have to show you the screen that I have to better explain playoff predictions moving forward. So, if you're watching on YouTube, obviously you're gonna have the benefit of seeing this screen when I pull it up here. If you are listening, you'll just have to do your best at when I'm talking through these playoff predictions and the remaining schedules, and try to visualize. And if you need to, just go watch the YouTube video. That way you can kind of follow along. So, in this edition of Fast Lane Fix, I'm actually going to save the playoff predictions here for a little bit. We are going to talk a little bit about the World Series because that game last night went into freaking 18 innings. I mean, they are going to end up, if this game were to go seven, or if this series goes 7 games, like they'll have basically played 8 games, which is it's kind of crazy. So, obviously, Freddie Freeman hits a home run in the 18th inning. I didn't even watch this. I didn't watch it just because, like, I was already in bed. I mean, good grief, this was reported at 2:18 a.m. So I'm not sure what time it actually ended. But I'm just going to kind of take you through a little bit of this article here. It says on the 609th pitch in the 399th minute of the game, and against the 19th pitcher deployed in the third game of this World Series, Freeman saw a full count sinker that sailed toward the middle of the strike zone and lifted it to straightaway center, which caused the Dodgers to win 6-5, obviously, last night. Basically, I think it was somebody reported to me this morning. I think it was my dad. My dad texted me this morning and said something about a stat about the team that wins game 3 in the World Series goes on to win the whole series, like at a high percentage or something dumb like that. I don't know. So there's all of that. Um, I kind of just want to get into playoffs or college football playoffs, but here's kind of one of the things that I'm moving forward with. Like, as we get transition into the winter time, what fast lane's going to be when college football starts to wind down and all that stuff, like we'll probably talk a little bit of NFL at times, but like wrestling is going to be the big one. Um, and so like, when I say wrestling, I talk about college wrestling and all that kind of stuff because I know that there's going to be another podcast by Nebraska Wrestle that involves myself and the guy in the group over there that is the entity of NE Wrestle. That's going to be a thing. So like when it comes to like high school wrestling and probably some college wrestling and all that kind of stuff, like there'll be some overlap on all of that I'll be involved with moving forward. I'm not sure exactly when the NE Wrestle podcast is going to start, but I know that we're kind of starting to get the engine revved up a little bit for that. And then there is one little special thing that I'm going to do after the state wrestling tournament is over in the that was my speaker, sorry. In the state wrestling tournament. So if you those of you that listen to this, and if you recall back during COVID, during that time and that stretch where nobody was doing anything, we were all inside, like I ran this virtual tournament for the Nebraska high school state wrestling fans. And what that was taking, everybody loves to compare across eras, right? I mean, we've seen that theme in college football. And so, like, well, is the 95 Huskers better than the 2001 Miami Hurricanes and vice versa, and blah, 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 blah. And every year seems to be someone wants to add their national championship team to that mix, which isn't always probably the smartest thing to do, but in any case, it plays on that sentiment that where people like to say like, well, geez, who's the best of all time and all this kind of thing, like, and it's not really something that we did that was just to say or make a definitive like this person's the best kid that's ever wrestled at 106, like we ran that and made it largely subjective. There wasn't a lot of objective reasoning behind it other than what you kind of know based off of like what you view. And with my background as a wrestling coach and a wrestling fan, through the course of my life, like I just did what I thought was best and what was most entertaining. So like we kept team scores and all that stuff. But through COVID, when everybody's just sitting around doing nothing, I mean, nobody was working anywhere. Like we were dropping these things on X and Twitter and all that stuff, like every evening and stuff like that. And we ran all the classes. Like I'm bringing that back. I guess my point of saying this is that we are going to bring this back. I'm going to use Layne as the entity to do this. I'm not sure that NE Wrestle wants to have us do that because there's so much stuff to cover in the current present time in terms of like wrestling content, with all the off-season stuff that goes on and off-season tournaments and blah blah blah, like that there's just not a lot of room for this fantasy stuff, although it is going to be quite entertaining because I'll do like a live stream of the draws, the seeds, all that kind of stuff to set the brackets up and all this. I mean, I have these sheets that are crazy, like has all the information, what the records were of each state champion, have it listed out by year. It'll be a 33-man bracket, just like the NCAAs and all that kind of stuff, and it'll all be done up with graphics and all that kind of stuff. It'll be really cool. So, with that said, let's make this episode a little shorter and to the point. We're going to do playoff predictions. There wasn't much for headlines in college football other than obviously, oh man, Michigan and Sharon Moore, it looks like they withdrew their appeals in the NCAA infractions case that centered on advanced scouting. He withdrew the appeal on September 29th. The university followed. This just kind of goes into the whole like Sharon Moore, Michigan sign stealing bullcrap, So, not a lot of headlines today. So let's jump right into this spreadsheet, and I'm going to try. Let's see if I can. I'm going to black out the other conferences while yeah, let's black this out so that way you can't see the other ones. We can just focus on the AAC. Here we go. Okay. Let's add this to the screen. Okay. So hopefully you guys can kind of see. If you're watching on YouTube, you might have to be there. You can, well, that might not be. Okay. Anyway, let's go right here. So this is kind of the teams that have a say in who's going to win the AAC right now. It's Navy, Tulane, South Florida, Memphis, North Texas. Okay, and you can see their current records right here. Navy's still sitting there undefeated at 7-0 after the Week 9 game. So, like, I have this line here, this big border line that tells you that these games in Week 9 have already happened, and then the rest, Week 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, would be the projections that I personally think will happen. There is absolutely no inside info or nothing like that, like obviously this is just my prediction on who I think is going to win based off of what I've seen in college football and out of these teams thus far. Obviously after South Florida's loss to Memphis a week ago, that changed my projections a little bit because I thought that South Florida was going to win that. I had Memphis originally going 9-3. Now I have them potentially winning out because I had them initially losing to South Florida and to Tulane. But after Memphis beat South Florida, I'm not sure that they don't beat Tulane as well. And then that whole game, like, here's the thing. Memphis's loss to UAB is such a farce. I mean, everybody's always given one, right? And I kind of talked about this and how it makes me angry that that is always afforded to big programs. Like the Miami loss to Louisville is probably not going to come back and bite them in the butt as long as all these teams end up being in this four-way tiebreaker, right? And so like that's why the whole metric exists to help them say that the big brands are able to lose once or have a bad game once and not be punished. Okay, so the same thing should be afforded here, right? So Memphis took one bad loss. They lost to UAB. UAB had some energy and juice after firing Trent Dilfer and all this kind of stuff, right? All right. So Memphis goes, hosts South Florida, wins. They were trailing the whole game. But South Florida has that win over Florida. They've played Miami. They've beaten North Texas. They've, like, South Florida's beaten Boise. So it's kind of one of those things that, like, I personally think that Memphis is the front runner for this conference. But again, that game with Tulane is going to go a long way to Can you guys see my mouse? I guess. Oh, you must not be able to see my mouse when it's on there. Okay. So, oh, there we go. Yeah, now you can see it. All right. So there's the Memphis game in week 11. Um, So let's just kind of go through this. Navy, I just think that their defense, like that's why you have losing at North Texas this week, then they're going to lose to Notre Dame, then they're going to lose to South Florida. Like they have the roughest ending to their schedule. Like they play all of these teams. The only one they avoid is actually Tulane, which is okay because it's not going to I don't think it's really going to matter cuz Navy's defense has proven that they are not near good enough to compete or to keep offenses at bay with this current slate of AAC conference membership right here. Navy, Tulane, where'd my screen go? There we go. Tulane, South Florida, Memphis, North Texas. So you see over here on the right-hand side, the final record I have for them. And you see a lot of this, and the conference record is obviously relevant because it doesn't really matter what your overall record is if your conference record is better than the team behind you or whatever. But here, the way it looks, because they all seems to avoid each other, with the exception of North Texas plays none of these teams except for they played Navy this week, and they have already played South Florida, but they avoid Tulane and Memphis. So I have 11-1 Memphis, 11-1 North Texas, both at 7 and South Florida will have the tiebreaker over North Texas. Memphis has the tiebreaker over South Florida. Memphis, if they win out, would also have the tiebreaker over Tulane. So the way that this should work, and I just got done yesterday talking about how transitive property in the ACC tiebreakers does not exist. And so, like, if the same thing is true with the AAC, then who exactly knows how this is going to turn out? Like, because you would think that North Texas would get the nod, but they may not because they have that loss to South Florida. Tulane and South Florida do not play each other. That's the problem here. So how do you figure out South Florida has a win, like basically they both have beaten a Power 4 team, South Florida's beaten Florida. Tulane has beaten Northwestern and Duke, so I mean I would guess I don't know. Like I have no idea how this gets sorted out. Basically, what needs to happen is you need Navy to outscore North Texas. But for God's sakes, North Texas threw for 600 yards last week. Like, and Navy's defense is worse than, or just as bad as Charlotte. So it'll be an interesting finish here. So, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this down real quick. How do I do that? Okay, there's that. And then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to black this out. Or I'll leave the AAC up. That's what I'll do. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to move to the Big 12. Okay. Present. Share screen. And top 30. There we go. Okie dokie. There. So, when it comes to the AAC, or sorry, the ACC, here's the craziness that is the AA or ACC. Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Duke, Miami, or Louisville, Miami. Current records. This is basically like you see their Duke's 4-3, but like okay, so they have losses to Illinois. They have a loss to Tulane. They have a I don't recall who their other loss is to. Someone in conference. Anyway, this game right here, these two games right here, Virginia at Cal, Duke at Clemson, are very, very big in terms of, I think personally, are big in determining the outcome of the ACC. Personally, I want some version of the ACC to happen where they get three teams in because I think that like there is a possibility that if Duke and Virginia both or sorry, if Virginia wins out, they would be 11-1, 8-0, and then this whole thing takes care of itself. Like if they don't lose at Cal, don't lose at Duke, and Virginia just wins out, you don't have to worry about tiebreakers. I just think that Duke is pretty good, and the way that Virginia's been playing and hanging on by a thread and being at Duke, that's probably a game that Virginia is going to drop, especially the way that Duke moves the ball. Like Duke moved the ball up and down the field on Georgia Tech, they just couldn't finish inside the 20, right? So it's kind of interesting looking at it because there's a potential for craziness to happen. Like what Miami needs to have happen is they have to have Virginia lose a game, probably at Duke. It doesn't. I guess it doesn't really even matter. They just need to drop a game or two. It could be two, multiple, but at minimum they need to drop one game. While they also, because they do not play each other, then you have the whole Pittsburgh Duke Malu. Like we kind of went over this yesterday in the tiebreaker stuff, but this is just the visual of it and my projections. Let's just instead of talking about hypotheticals, if you want to hear the hypothetical, go to the episode yesterday. So in this situation, it would be Louisville and Georgia Tech because the two teams that are tied here are the two teams that have played head to head, right? So in this case, Louisville would get the nod to go to the conference title game to play Georgia Tech. I would think that Georgia Tech wins that, and then ultimately Louisville would go to 11-2, but you don't get penalized for playing in your conference title game. Miami's sitting there at 11-1 with the win over Notre Dame and blah 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 blah, right? So let's just do this. This makes it easier and quicker. Okay. The Big 12. The Big 12. BYU, Cincinnati, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Houston, Utah, TCU. Now, I'm not sold on Arizona State still being a threat to get there. They would need a lot of help. They have to win at Iowa State. Have to win at Iowa State. Have to win out. If they do, that would put them at 9-3 and 7-2 in conference, and then you have to worry about like BYU would have to drop these two games that we have projected here. You have to have Cincinnati lose at Utah and maybe maybe lose at TCU, or I don't know. I mean, I don't see Cincinnati losing to Arizona. Texas Tech would have to lose another game. And where on this, like they could lose at Kansas State. Texas Tech's backup quarterback's hurt. like done for the year, tore his ACL, and Baron Morton is also hobbled. So like there's a potential for some issues with Texas Tech moving forward. Houston, like they play some pretty good defense. Like, man, they can ball control. Willie Fritz has them rolling. Like that's a okay. Let me segue here for a second. Willie Fritz took a crappy Houston team. What did they do last year? Let's just stop sharing this for a second. I wish I wasn't on video, but I don't care. Okay. What was Houston's record a year ago? Let's look this up real quick. Just for all intent, like just for all purpose sake that hiring the right guy can get a quick turnaround. Like Indiana did it, Houston's doing it. Like that's starting to really kind of piss me off because I just so badly want Nebraska to be better. Like it drives me nuts. Houston was 4-8 a year ago, 3-6 in conference. And now they're poised to go 11-1. 11-1. Are you kidding me? And you can talk about the Big 12 all you want, but you'd be wrong. Like just because you'd be like, well, they haven't played anybody. Yeah, but they're still playing level competition compared to themselves. So it doesn't matter. It's still relevant. It's relevant and relative to who they're playing. Like, is Houston a national title contender? No. But them going 11-1, playing in the Big 12 and playing 9 conference games, that's a big freaking turnaround because it's freaking relative to their talent pool. Ugh. Guys don't understand college football. Just pissing me off. All right, let's go back to this sharing of the screen here. All right. So you have Houston. Gosh, I don't think they're going to win out just because, something in college, it always happens. Every year it happens. When Oklahoma State was possible to go to the national title game, or when, like when these teams like Cincinnati and BYU right now, like there's a part of me that's like something's going to happen so that Texas Tech can get in there and Utah or whoever. Because as much as you don't want to think it, they're going to try to protect the most TV rating savvy teams out of those conferences. Like that's just how it is, and it pisses a person off. Or what they'll do is they'll have it so that the situation at hand right now, you could have 2 11-1 teams and 3 10-2 teams, and really that's not that far fetched to see Cincinnati. Maybe what if Cincinnati beats Utah and then loses to BYU, and then Cincinnati's sitting there at 10-2, BYU's at 11-2, 11-1. They could have 3 11-1s. So I don't know, man, but the way that this is currently playing out, you have 11-1 Memphis, 11-1 North Texas, 11-1 Georgia Tech, 11-1 Louisville, 11-1 Miami. Virginia very easily could be 11-1. Like that's a right there. Like that could, and then you have BYU, and I just picked them to lose at Texas Tech, which I'm not sure that's going to happen now. Like I don't think that's going to happen. I might just flip that while we're on episode right now. Like I don't think Texas Tech beats BYU. Not with their injuries and their quarterback situations, and man, I don't know. I'll change that to 10-2, 7-2, change BYU to 11-1. So they kind of flip spots, but I don't know if they lose. I don't know if BYU loses to Cincinnati. Like that's just me being hopeful. I don't think they do. I don't think BYU's losing another game. Personally, I'm gonna switch that too. Oh, guys, man, this is like, it's crazy. It's too bad because I think Cincinnati's pretty good, but they don't get the benefit of They don't get the benefit of getting a favorable schedule at Utah's tough. Now, if Cincinnati wins at Utah, then this, I mean, who knows? Who knows what happens? Okay, so here's the current changes then. If I have BYU winning out, which I think most people would probably agree with me, like they probably think they'll lose to Texas, but the quarterback situation of Texas Tech, their injuries all over the place. Like it's just not happening the way Texas Tech wants it to. So then you would have BYU at 12-0, Texas Tech at 10-2, Houston at 11-1, Utah 10-2. In this situation, if it was BYU goes in, they would play Houston for they would play Houston for the conference title game. Houston doesn't have to win that to be a potential playoff team. You know, like it just depends on where they're rated going into that week. You kind of get a glimpse going into conference championship weekend, knowing where the college football playoff committee views them, because they are not going to punish them. Like if you're sitting 12th and you lose to BYU, who's sitting 7th or 8th because they're undefeated, you are, and let's say it's a 24-21 game, Houston's making the playoff. Like that's just the way it is. They would have to be on the outside of that and those rankings on the like to be able to jump. They'd have to beat BYU to jump others. You know, that maybe just sitting around not playing in conference title games. Now, that's possible. Okay, and I see that probably being more likely. So that way they don't set the college football playoff committee is going to be very careful in not setting a precedent of, I mean, they already said it, like they're going to be protective so that they don't have to give the optic of moving a loser in the conference title game down. But it very well, easily, and probably should be that they put them in a position where, like, maybe Houston is, okay, you're 13th or 14th going into that game in the Big 12 championship versus BYU, while BYU's 7th. Houston wins that game, then that means, you know, you're knocking, you know, somebody out that's 10-2, maybe in the SEC, or a Big 10 10-2. I don't know, you know. So, okay. Let's go. Oh, no. I can't do that while I'm... There we go. Okay. So, I'll just go back to the original, what I had originally. Okay. Well, that sucks. Okay, so then the Big Ten, you have all these teams that are... Illinois is basically out. I don't know. I didn't need to have them in there anymore. They 3 losses in conference. Like, you win out, you're 6-3. Like, that's not... I mean, I'm just gonna delete them right now. Like, that's not a team we need to track anymore. They're not in playoff contention. See you later. Okay. Now, you have the Big Ten and the SEC on your screen right now if you're watching. In the Big Ten, you got Indiana, Ohio State. Aforementioned thought that they're going to play each other. It's basically who's going to be the third team out of the Big Ten. And I can see a version of neither. Like, here, okay. I am an Oregon guy. I'm an Oregon guy. Everybody knows it that listens to this. They all know this. They have an off week. I have them losing at Iowa next week. Next week. Okay. Is that absolutely crazy? No. I don't think so. Who has Oregon beaten? Anybody care to take a guess? Who has Oregon beaten? Let's go to their schedule quick. La 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 la. Right here. Montana State, Oklahoma State, awful. Northwestern, not very good. Okay. Oregon State, awful. Penn State, not good. Lost to Indiana. Beaten Rutgers. Okay. Rutgers is 4-4. Wisconsin's 2-6. Oregon State hasn't won a game. Northwestern's 5-3 and had the luxury, like they're not going to go bowling, like they're going to end up 5-7. Oklahoma State, I mean, look at Penn State is freaking 3-4. Like Oregon's resume is dog water. Other than the fact that they played Indiana fairly tough at home, guys, as much as I like Oregon, I don't think their resume is going to be good enough if they're 10-2. They have to win out, go 11-1. I mean, they get the preseason hype like bump and all that kind of stuff, right? Because they beat Penn State when Penn State was number 2 or 3 or whatever it was. And so then everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, Oregon's so good." But some people tend to forget Oregon, just like Nebraska, is one of the youngest rosters in the Big 10. I don't think Oregon's going to finish winning out. Now they may not lose at Iowa, but I just don't see Oregon winning out with that schedule. They play USC at home and then they have to go to Seattle, which is always a tough place to play. Like I could see them losing that game to Washington as well. And like I'm half tempted to change it right now. Washington's pretty good. Now the thing that helps Oregon out is their defense is pretty tough. Their offense has gotten a little conservative, that's lost a little bit of its playmaking ability. If Oregon can't run the ball, they struggle. Their receivers are not their wideouts are not that good. Aside from Decorian Moore. Decorian Moore is a dude, and Gary Bryant's okay, but there's a disconnect happening where they're having some issues finding ways to score. Now I understand they just dismantled Rutgers. They have to show me something at Iowa for me to start believing that they're a national title contender again. Like, are they a playoff contender? Absolutely. But their resume alone does not help them currently where they stand at 7-1. They've beaten nobody. Absolutely no one. They win at Iowa. That turns my head because, games at Kinnick and all that stuff and the way Iowa's been playing. That's a big deal. Minnesota's not very good. I think the game that they played against Nebraska was more of an outlier. Like I think Nebraska's the better team. USC would turn my head, and so would at Washington. If Oregon wins out with that schedule, that might be enough to get them in, especially by the time they play Washington, because then Washington would be what, 9-2 going into that game. So, yeah, it's an interesting time. But anyway, here's the projections that I have. I have Indiana, Ohio State winning out. Obviously, Oregon finishing 10-2, Iowa finishing 10-2, and then you get into all these 9-3s, 8-4s. That I feel like if somebody could get on a run, they could potentially, like this. Some of this could be inverted, right? I'm kind of looking at, I don't see Minnesota. I mean, man, Minnesota, no. So in Michigan State, that Michigan State game is actually a tight spread. So anyway, Minnesota's available. They are there. I mean, I feel like if you have two conference losses, you're basically out of the conference race anyway. But like their ability to finish 10-2 is right there. I might have to just delete Minnesota there as well. I have them at, yeah, delete. Okay. Now, if Nebraska beats USC this week, it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold here in Lincoln. And then goes on the road and beats the UCLA team that's been hot but just got destroyed by Indiana. So like their momentum is now shot. The honeymoon period of post Deshaun Foster is dwindling. Nebraska wins these next two. I think you could probably get a win up at Penn State. I think it's a little bit tougher of a game than you'd care to admit with those running backs. Nebraska's got to be able to defend the run really well. Penn State's going to have the worst passing offense probably moving forward, which means that if we can sell out on they don't have good receivers. Their quarterback they threw the ball like 12 times against Iowa. So Nebraska could sit there at 9-2 going into the Iowa game too. It's possible. It just depends on what happens this weekend against USC. So like I said, there's still a lot to be played out here in the Big Ten. I don't think that if Nebraska beats USC and beats Iowa, because Iowa would be ranked, especially if they had a win over Oregon and at USC too. Like that'd be a huge game. That would be a huge game on Black Friday. Humongous game. Because the more you keep winning, the rankings are going to take care of themselves. Like people are like, well, they don't have any ranked wins. It doesn't matter. We're in week freaking 10, right? This thing is the landscape of this is going to change like crazy. Then you have the SEC. Missouri is, for all intents and purposes, is done. With Bo Pribula, I'm gonna delete them. Like he's out for the year. Like that game, like they're done. Texas. So these will be interesting. These are the teams basically that I think have a chance to make the playoff. A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Oklahoma, Vandy, Tennessee. Now, any of these combinations of games could change. Like does Texas A&M? They're not going to lose at Missouri now. Like, does Texas A&M lose at Texas at the end of the year? Does Texas drop to Vanderbilt and at Georgia and then beat A&M at the end of the year to just make things go crazy? I don't know. It wouldn't be enough to take A&M out of it. And what if Texas beats Vanderbilt and Georgia? I don't see that happening, but all this stuff's crazy. So that's kind of where I have the projections right here. And then here's my playoff seeds right here. Ohio State at number 1, A&M at number 2, Indiana at 3, Alabama at 4, Georgia at 5, Georgia Tech at 6, Ole Miss at 7, Texas Tech at 8, Louisville at 9, Miami at 10, Memphis as the G5 representative at 11, and then Notre Dame at 12. The first teams out. Houston, Iowa, Oregon, Vandy, Cincinnati, BYU, Utah, Texas. And that's based on my original projection before starting the episode. Now, if BYU goes undefeated and wins Texas Tech and at Texas Tech and at Cincinnati, like BYU is going to be probably in, because they'll have beaten. Well, in this situation where Houston is out, I have them as the team that's not playing in the title game, I believe. So, a lot of stuff left to be played. But here's kind of your representatives of who I think will be there at the end. The SEC, I think they're going to kind of cannibalize each other. Vanderbilt's kind of that team that's going to be the one that's, can they beat? If Vandy beats Texas in Texas this week, that's going to go a long way to deciding whether or not I think they can. Like that rivalry game at Tennessee is going to be a big deal. Tennessee's way, way more potent of an offense. So I think that gives Vandy some problems. Texas, Arch Manning's out. So yeah, which might be better. That might actually throw a giant wrench into everything. So anyway, that's kind of where I have projections right now. So if you couldn't really tell with basically listening, maybe go check out the YouTube video. It's kind of sketchy. Not a lot of high production value, but we got it done. So let's stop sharing. Okay. That's going to do it for the Fast Lane Fix today. We only went about 38 minutes. We just want to say thank you for listening, as always, and we appreciate you interacting with us, as always, as well. So with that said, we're going to say adios and have a great Tuesday.